Welcome to the Tech This Out podcast. I'm Walt Maciborski. Joining me today is one of the most interesting men in the world in Austin, Texas right now. He does a little bit of everything. Jason Scharf, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Walt.
You have a technology forward-focused podcast called Austin Next. You have some incredible guests on there. Welcome to the other side of the mic today. You also are an investor in BioHealth, biotech, that kind of world.
Yep.
You have a research arm where you're researching what's happening in Austin, especially in the biohealth and tech scene. You do a little bit of everything, and you're a TEDx speaker.
Yes.
But what makes it really interesting for me to watch you do, he's taken on the big boys, folks. You took on, there was a wave of everybody loved Austin, and there was a big movement here. Now there seems to be a little snarkiness happening where people are saying, Austin is losing its shine, but you actually stood up to a major publication and said, wait. The data doesn't say what you're publishing.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. That article seems to come out from a different publication like every year at this point now. So it's kind of like it gets, lubing up the muscles and then getting out and kind of smacking them back.
Now, tell me about the article and what riled you up.
Yeah, I mean, so it was like, it was the Wall Street Journal and said like the Austin's tech reign is over. And I was like, that's news to me. But then the actual article itself had one piece of data from Signal Fire that puts out a really great tech talent report that's saying, okay, so Austin had lost 6% of their, startup and tech employment. All right, so that sounds terrible, right? All right, so here's some of the parts that don't come with that. Boston lost 4% of startup employment. LA was right around 6%. Dallas was around 6%. Denver was around 6%. Vancouver was about 11%. So what does Austin have to do specifically with this? And if you go to the Signal Fire report itself, its headline is Miami and San Diego buck the trend. So they were the only ones that actually showed startup growth. Now, it may be the AI productivity. There's some recent Carta data showing that hiring in general is just barely against departures at startups. So we actually may be seeing this kind of productivity boom from AI. And then the other part of it was just highly anecdotal. Mm-hmm. You had one person who was in the startup space, we're going to use that loosely, who in 3 years was in 5 cities. And then you had a software dev company that wasn't able to get any clients here. Feels to me like they should be more looking in the mirror and then saying, oh, it's the city, it's not me.
It almost felt like there was an agenda, maybe there was an assignment, hey, find out what's wrong with Austin and try to make it work.
Yeah, definitely. It feels like the headline was written first and then go do something about it. And I was like, okay, yeah, I can write that too, about you pick your city.
I think really what gets under your skin, you've also published reports tracking the data for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And you really dive into the numbers. And I think it's something that we're all feeling on the streets. As a technology reporter in Austin, I see the innovation, I see the money starting to flow here, and I see things happening, but I didn't have all of the hard data. You went and did that. What did your last report say about the data and what's happening here?
Well, I think first let me talk about Austin Tech in general and then getting down into BioHealth, right? So Austin Tech, yes, we have less migration than we did in 21 and 22, which was, Texas as a whole, 100,000 something people, domestic migration versus 80-something thousand in, pre-COVID. And now we're down from that and above, the previous trend. So it is a new normal that's kind of coming in. VC funding is another kind of thing. Coming in, the Austin tech scene was 7th, 8th, 9th, somewhere in that, kind of maybe getting $1 billion, 1.5 billion. We had that huge run up like everybody did. And then all of a sudden, we came down to earth, sitting now at fighting for 5th. And this year is just absolutely crazy. I mean, so Q1 was about a little over $3 billion in funding in the Austin tech scene, which, by the way, would make it our 3rd biggest year ever just in Q1, because you had Ninja One with $600 million, you had Saronic with $500 million, you had Aptronic with $400 million. So I think we need nuances. Q1 of next year, when it goes apples to apples, is going to look down because I don't think that's a sustainable thing. But we were actually 4th in the country. And I think we're going to be fighting for, 4th, 5th this year.
The infrastructure is here, and you're really a perfect testament to this. You came from San Diego, California. You saw the universities, you saw the ecosystem, you saw the innovation, and I think it was one of those aha moments for you. saying, wow, Austin is its own Austin, and you preach that.
Right.
I think another thing that really bothers you, and I think a lot of techies in Austin have felt this for a while, we're not Silicon Hills, we're Austin. And
Oh, dear God.
why is that? That's something that I think really bothers you.
I didn't know this was going to be about, let's push every single button of mine here. Well, because, look, Silicon Valley wasn't trying to be like Silicon Apple or Motor City, you know, and if you go back, and this is going to be a shock to everybody, there were innovation ecosystems before Silicon Valley. I know, it's kind of crazy. And so understanding, it was always that unique identity, right? If you look at like Renaissance Florence, if you look at industrial Manchester to 1950s Detroit and kind of the center of the world in the automotive, like you have to be connected to and understand your first principles. And as soon as you say Silicon, beach, hills, alley, slopes, or the 9,000 other variations, you're already looking to be second best. I mean, one of the great lines that I learned on the podcast, everybody kind of knows the Oscar Wilde quote that, you know, flattery is the sincerest form of
Imitation.
Imitation, sorry, is the sincerest form of flattery. That's only half the quote. The other half of the quote is that mediocrity pays to greatness. So if you're going to be saying, we're Silicon XYZ, you're putting a big sign out that says, we are never going to be as good as some other place.
X, yeah. And you know, as we continue to find our own way and forge ahead, you also found the space to be really Texan in a sense. Like, you can call up founders, you can have meetups with founders, you can, you know, you're invited to the big events in town, and I feel like everybody wants to see everybody succeed. Everybody's competing, everybody wants to win, but I feel like everybody wants everybody to win.
Yes, there's definitely, you know, I tend to think about ecosystems generally as, you know, onions. And as you move down the onion, you kind of meet more interesting people. And that's pretty much the way I think most have worked. And I think part of that is there has to be, there's a solidification. Like it kind of gets to where it is, and then you have those kind of layers go. The two things that I've ever seen about Austin that are the constants are change. I didn't know until 2 years here that Austin wasn't the original name of the city, that it was Waterloo. Now, of course, that makes sense since it existed before Texas existed. And then people complaining about change. So like I remember there was an article that I saw from the 80s that was like, you know, everyone's moving here and traffic is terrible. And you can go back to like, I saw something like, it was like the 1890s, it roughly said the same thing. So it's like, oh, it's perfect when I got here, now stop changing it.
Right, don't change it on. Yeah.
So you have this openness of everything, but it also really is this kind of frontier mentality, this kind of cowboy meets the hippie meets the futurist, really is what is Austin. So you have people wanting to build, you know, the new stack, whether, you know, the technological, cultural, intellectual stack, and you can do that here.
Yeah, and that's exciting. You've been pretty busy along with the city as it's been moving. You did a TEDx talk. You talked at Fed Supernova.
Health Supernova.
Yeah. Health Supernova. What are your themes? What are you trying to, you know, let the audience in the health tech world know, but also the greater message?
Yeah, I think when I think about like the bioinnovation tech stack, all of the technology that's changing in, you know, whether it be, you know, gene editing or the ability, longevity or brain-controlled interfaces, all this kind of stuff is changing so rapidly that it's crashing into our current healthcare system. And it's not some giant conspiracy, it's that things are not good at disruptive change. That's why we have startups. That's why you have things like Clayton Christensen's book, Innovator's Dilemma. And here in Austin, we really are building at the frontier. You have all of those kind of bioinnovation tech stack companies and the business of health. So new delivery, whether it be telehealth or like at Everly Health or Wheel or Function, to new ways of doing clinics like Harbor, to companies like Emerald Cloud Lab, who is doing, you know, remote controlled labs. There's understanding how the entire stack shifts. And again, it fits back into Austin because it's like, how are we going to drastically change human health in the healthcare system? How are we going to get to Mars? How are we going to 3D print houses and change the housing crisis? Like, these are the kinds of missions that people here are on. And
it's exciting, you know, and it's cross-functional in many ways because I see bio and health tech people over at a building seminar with Icon, and everybody is kind of like learning from each other, from 3D printing to new AI stuff. I'm going to throw some names out there and just give me your reaction on these companies. Aptronic.
We are becoming one of the robotic capitals of the world. I think Aptronic is really, really interesting in terms of just what they're building, the speed at which they're building, the partnerships that they've done with Google, and so, and I think they're obviously one of the great successes out of UT.
Scaling fast, and they're getting a ton of money.
Yeah.
So that's exciting to see. Paradromics.
Paradromics is another one. I think that we're the neurotech capital of the world. You know, whether it be in BCI with Paradromics and Neuralink here to the companies like Phantom Neuro, like all of that stuff from the software of understanding the human brain all the way to, you know, leading the future with BCI.
Yeah, and then Ceronic. It's almost like a kid's dream in the bathtub that became a reality.
Except for built by a seal.
Right, so, right, built by a seal, yeah. It could kill you.
Yes, and Dino's one of those people, like, if you saw on the street, you wouldn't, like, he doesn't have this image of, like, that kind of super soldier, but, like, I know who I'd call if there was ever an issue. No, I mean, like, Ceronic is obviously one of the superstar companies here, and I think just in general, defense tech is one of the things. Again, it's that convergence of atoms, bits, and intelligence. You know, they are, you know, water drones and autonomous vehicles. Like, good, we're good at autonomous vehicles, right? And we understand how these things are happening. So whether it be companies like, or funders like 8VC or Overmatch or America's Frontier Fund that are all here building out, you know, that defense tech ecosystem, along with Army Futures Command is here. Like, it all kind of, again, comes together into building really what is the nature of the Austin ecosystem.
And then you had the CEO and founder of IntraBio.
Yeah.
And they're on the move again.
Yep.
They're hoping to have new announcements soon, I think.
Yeah, and a great example of when I first thought about pharma, like straight, I'm creating a new drug, doesn't so much fit into the ecosystem here, right? Like I said, it's again back to that tech stack and business of health. But then, like, when Mallory and I met and I had him on the podcast, you know, he told this story about, like, okay, we have something like, you know, 15, 20 different indications. And normally you go one at a time to the FDA. And of course he asked, this is where the kind of the radical founder, the different mindset comes in, he says, well, what if we all did them in one application? What's the worst that could happen? They said no. What happened? They said yes.
Yeah, that's exciting to see.
So I think it's just that different mentality here, and I think that's one of the things about what's going on, especially in bio and health, which is why we're tracking it and putting together, because when I got here, I, like many other people, moved to Austin for Austin and assumed I would go do get a remote job, do something else. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, we raised $1 billion in 21. Oh, we raised almost another $1 billion in 22, and all these unicorns are being born. It's actually pretty big, and people just don't know about it, and it's highly fragmented.
Yeah. With all this data and all this innovation, you're actually launching something new. You're launching a new website. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so for the second year running, I put out this report, working now with Yanni Toomey, a serial founder here at I'm Aware and KEYE Therapeutics. And the constant thing, like, it's the fun with algorithms, right? You put it up on LinkedIn, you put it up on X, and it tries to get out there, and then everyone goes like, where is it, where is it, where is it? And so one of the things we're doing now is we're launching austinbiohealth.com to really be the place people can find that, that report, things like, interviews that we're doing, trying to I put out every kind of now a weekly Austin Bio and Health Roundup, so that'll kind of come from the website as well. So just really being able to solve that fragmentation and being able to pull everybody together and know what's actually going on.
Yeah, get everybody on the same page.
Yeah.
That's one frustrating thing. There are so many things happening, it's hard to keep your arms around it. It's like, oh, I missed that conference. I didn't even know it was happening. What do you think are our challenges?
I think this is probably across, I think about a lot in bio and health, but it really is going to cross everything, right? So one is the fragmentation, right? There's lots of people here. There are some connective tissues. I think they're more growing in those kind of threads across different things. But, on one hand, it's like, I didn't know all the people in biohealth and what they were doing. They didn't know everybody else. And then as you expand, like, who's all the quantum people, who's all the robotics people. So helping to solve that fragmentation, while being the fact that we are a gigantic and growing city that's both physically and philosophically at different points. The second thing is infrastructure, right? I'll use infrastructure really broadly, whether that means things like wet lab, which in the case of our sector, you don't really need as much of it as we might think, but we still need some, to more talent, more capital. We need more of everything. I think one of the things that has been talked about with Austin is punching above our weight. And so the ability to do that has been great, but at some point you want the weight to catch up to
Yeah.
what our ability. So you got to bulk up there. And then the last thing is kind of what's getting back to that, Wall Street Journal, other things, is narrative. Is people would think, oh, it's a satellite city of the Bay Area, right? Or there's no engineering talent here. It's just it's just product. It's just marketing people and sales people, and that's starting to change. Like Gauntlet AI is a great example of. It's an education program that they are producing the absolute best AI engineers. They bring everybody here, and it's I think 12 weeks, and these are like AI first. The things they are building, I just saw the other day. They needed to build using AI a Snapchat clone in 1 day.
Wow.
So that's the talent that's starting to come here. So people are solving a lot of these things, and we just then need to get the narrative out.
And then there's something that's brewing outside of Austin, but in the Austin ecosystem is Prototown. Have you heard of that?
I haven't had an opportunity to go down, but I think of Prototown's a great example of we need to think about Austin as really it is the metro. Like everything from Bastrop to Prototown up to Cedar Park, because you can't build a rocket downtown.
Yeah.
But there are certain things that you can, if you're a software-only company, the big tech, that makes a lot more sense. When we think about just these different neighborhoods, I mean, to ask the question of like New York, like where's the tech spot in New York? Or San Francisco, where is you mean the whole city? But you do answer the question if you're to say, like for San Francisco, where's the AI hub? Oh yeah, it's this particular neighborhood. Yeah. And you start getting in that. And I think we're now at that Cambrian explosion moment where it is going to be, east and north is like, that's the manufacturing hubs, right? It's like Saronics out by the airport now, the Gigafactory. You're going to ask the questions about like, where's the right biospace? Because obviously you have the upcoming hospital kind of around downtown, but does that really work for lab space? Probably not. Where are all the robotics people going to be hanging out? And then how do we make sure that they're all still connected together? Because when the robot person and the bio person and the quantum person and the defense person talk, really cool stuff happens.
That's right. But the good thing is we have a lot of land in Texas.
Yes.
And I really want to touch on the money. There was so much money in oil and energy, but you have the coast leading the VC funding. It'd be nice to see if we can get some of that more older traditional money into the innovation sector.
It's a challenge that I hear a lot from this, because I think we hear that like, oh, they're all in real estate, they're all in they're all in oil and gas, and it's like, well, they're taking risks in being the wildcatters. Why aren't they doing it in tech? And I've softened a little bit because I understand, because as an early stage investor, the money that I'm not throwing at that is like in really boring stuff, kind of thing. And so it is an interesting challenge when you go like, you take all of this risk in your day job, in your other assets, can you also take risk as well? So it's a challenge, but as you say, like whether it be all the family office in Dallas money, all the oil and gas in Houston, I think there's a lot of opportunities. And then back to just kind of being able to make out that that pitch and understanding what the opportunities are. And I think that is just going to take more time.
I see it loosening up for sure, especially when you have, we haven't even touched on the commercial space race and Firefly putting Blue Ghost on the moon. I mean, that sector is crazy.
I was just comparing those images to the moon landing and just the quality of those images and difference. And it's like, the things that my kids are growing up and just seeing like, oh yeah, a high def shot of it landing, and then that final bit of like the shadow being cast, like it's art. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that actually where I think Austin is going to thrive is, I call it the inspiration innovation loop. Is it's hard to see an app and get inspired, right? When you see pictures from the moon of high def us landing on it, that gets you inspired. When you go, I took my 2 older kids down to Brownsville to watch the Starship 6 launch, because it was like, this is important for them to see. Of course, having to be the one they didn't catch. And I was like, really? So getting them to see that, to, Waymos running around, to now the robo-taxis, to all the different robots running around the street, like there's this palpable sense of the future that they can ask different questions. I mean, like my 6-year-old, we were just walking downtown from like an event, and a Waymo goes by, and he goes, why does the Waymo have a steering wheel? I'm like, that's a great question that you can ask when you see the things versus if he sees an app or whatever, it's not going to ask those kinds of like more intuitive questions.
Yeah. Especially if it's autonomous, why does it need a steering wheel?
Yeah.
Anything I didn't ask or you think is important to say about your journey here or what you see in the future?
I really think, look, so when I gave that keynote, one of the things was interesting is like, we were in bio and health 24th in VC funding in 2017. This year, as it stands right now, we're at $500 million at this moment, and we're likely going to be fighting for fifth. Like, that's a trajectory I haven't seen anywhere else. And when you think about, Carter just put out data by ecosystems, we're second in hardware. And I would say all the defense tech, robotics, like we can name the companies that are falling under that category. So just what's happening here and what we're building, I think is something really special. And it continues to attract the frontier mindset, it continues to attract the cowboys of all different shapes and sizes. And I think we're gonna be talking about Austin in 100, 200 years the same way that we talk about Florence and Manchester and all the others.
It's an exciting future for sure. And one more time, tell me about your new website.
So it's just austinbiohealth.com. And we're gonna, right now, I said we're putting up some videos. It's live now. The report's all there, and we're gonna continue to basically have everybody be able to find out what's going on about the ecosystem.
And then follow his Austin Next podcast too. He has some of the greatest guests in town and coming through town. Jason Scharf, thank you as always.
Thanks a lot.